Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have David Bahnsen, author of There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths, and also the founder, managing partner, and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group. He's here to discuss the importance of economic literacy. David, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, you got it. And David, we talk a lot about financial literacy, but I haven't heard much about economic literacy. What was the genesis behind this book?
You know, it's a great distinction between financial literacy and economic literacy. I think our society struggles in both categories, and I'm passionate about there being a greater need for financial literacy, but there are a lot of people who are carrying that torch who also feel strongly about that. I think economic literacy is a bit different in that there's more of a philosophical undertone to it. It's how to think about some of the things that we take for granted. America is a free enterprise society. How many people understand why we believe in free enterprise, why markets function the way they do, what our desired intentions are, and what are some of the principles that go into a market economy? I am very passionate about people understanding why they believe that, transcending just an intuition towards free markets and having a greater foundational understanding of why free enterprise has been such a overall good for society.
And David, I feel like the time that we're in right now, clearly, hopefully coming to the other side of this pandemic, we've been arguing a lot, whether it's in financial media or in social media, wherever platform has been provided about how economic theory is playing out. So when you talk about the market economy, is this actually key to the issues of the day that we're facing?
I think it is. I think that we're in a moment. One of the things I was saying a lot during the height of the pandemic was that you don't formulate your principles during a crisis. You bring your principles into a crisis. It's why we have principles, so that we have something to look to and act upon during those moments in life when they most matter. And I think that both on the political left and the political right, there is a tendency right now to abandon principles for what might be pragmatic and expedient in the moment. My belief is that by rediscovering and reasserting the foundational principles of a market economy, of a free society, of individual exchange, of self-interest, of the profit motive, of a greater understanding of a lot of these things that undergird what has created market success over the years, we will have better foundations in place when we go through other crises, when we deal with the challenges of the moment with fiscal policy, with monetary policy, et cetera.
David, I think that's an excellent point that you bring up, because I think we're asserting the words freedom, whether it comes to freedom of speech or freedom from vaccinations or freedom of lockdowns and masks, and inequities, another term that's been thrown around a lot. So with the way society is thinking of freedom and equality and economic inequities and so forth, is there a way to marry what earlier economic thinkers and perhaps even thinkers from the 20th century and contemporaries are asserting in terms of economic theory? Is there a way to bring this all together and sort of get our economic theory path back on track?
I believe there is. And one of the things that the classical school of economics was known for, we think about people from the 1700s and 1800s. Adam Smith is perhaps the most famous in that camp. David Ricardo, John Baptiste, John Stuart Mill. These are older, these are thought of as sort of Enlightenment and 19th century figures. And yet they were some of the first people that started making us think about economics around humanity, around what it meant for the cause of human flourishing. And when you get into the 20th century, the Austrian school, even John Maynard Keynes, who I disagree with on a lot of things, but he was arguing from a vantage point of how this would affect the ability to create certain human outcomes. Well, right now, most in the economic profession have abandoned this idea of human action as the centerpiece of economics and view it as an econometric exercise, something mathematical, something purely scientific. I think that's inaccurate. I think what we need right now, when we want to be able to apply economic solutions to a lot of these challenges and some of the examples you brought up, is a restoration of our view that at its core, economics is the study of humans acting, that we are all made with incredible creative, innovative, productive capacity, and that has created the greatest advancements in human history. And when we think about economics, we need to think about what best incentivizes the most productive aspects of human behavior.
Is there a way, though, realistically, to put this into place? Back to my point before, labeling. Everyone is labeled. We're labeling a movement as something. Yeah. For example, I'm a capitalist. I'm a libertarian. I'm whatever you want to label yourself. I feel as if everyone's bifurcating themselves into these certain camps and labeling themselves as such, with probably not understanding the core definition of it. Is there a way to either reverse that or move forward in the right way to re-educate ourselves and get on the correct theoretical path?
I believe there is. And I think you've pinpointed a very important aspect when it comes to economics, is that economics does not need to be primarily a political subject. Okay, so for people who lean to the right or the left, libertarian or elsewhere, the fact of the matter is that one can view economics without a particular political bias. Now, out of their views of economics, they may formulate some of their political policy opinions. My views of tax policy are informed by my understanding of economics, but my view of economics is not informed by my view of tax policy. There's a chicken or egg problem here, and I think we do well to make this a less partisan exercise and instead view economics as sort of a foundational social science that leads us to a better understanding of humanity. It doesn't make for easy categorizations, because you could have someone who seems to lean libertarian in a lot of ways and yet has a view of another issue that doesn't fit into a political box, but that's okay. We need less tribalization these days.
Be interesting, almost institutionalize that and teach economic theory and social sciences courses. Perhaps we even need to start before we get into business and think about it through the lens, okay, I'm taking poli-sci, well, perhaps I need to understand how basic economic theory influences that particular path. So I think it's really interesting that you could tie it into that as well. I mean, when you think about the core education system that we follow.
Yeah, so I think there's two examples you bring up there that are exactly at the key motivation of why I wrote the book. I believe most people formulate their view of economics and economic policy, economic application out of their politics, and I want them to do the opposite. And I also think, as a guy who runs a large investment firm and has been on Wall Street my whole career, I think most investors formulate their view of economics out of their financial practices instead of formulating their financial practices out of their economics. I think economic theory needs to become more foundational.
All right, David, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.